The Three-Eyed Raven, Maester Aemon, Rhaegar, and Jon Snow are all related. All of them have the blood of the dragon running through their veins. In fact, the Three-Eyed Raven and Jon Snow both have the blood of the dragon, as well as the blood of the first men, making them ice and fire. Now, one of the main reasons I believe the Three-Eyed Raven and Maester Aemon stayed in contact with each other over the years is because of their relationship with one another. These men were actually a lot closer than you might think. The Three-Eyed Raven, also known as the Three-Eyed Crow or Blood Raven, did not always live out beyond the wall inside a werewood. Long before that, he was known as Lord Brynden Rivers, the bastard son of King Aegon Targaryen, the fifth of his name. There was already a lot of secrecy surrounding this character before he became known as the Three-Eyed Raven. As a matter of fact, there were many who would say that he was a sinister sorcerer and a spy master who effectively ran the kingdom with his spies and spells. Not only was he once the hand of the king, but he was also the master of whisperers, and he would continue to do the latter even after he disappeared while ranging out beyond the wall. So as you can see, the Three-Eyed Raven has been whispering secrets in the ears of those who would listen for many years. Now, what is really interesting about Maester Aemon and the Three-Eyed Raven is that they joined the Night's Watch on the same exact day. They actually left King's Landing and rode up to Castle Black together, and I must say, I would love to know what they discussed during their long journey. Now, we all know Aemon became the Maester at Castle Black, but the Three-Eyed Raven eventually became the Lord Commander at Castle Black, working hand in hand with Maester Aemon. We know how close Maester Aemon and Lord Commander Mormont were while they were at Castle Black together, but how close do you think Maester Aemon and the Three-Eyed Raven were while they were at Castle Black together, especially considering they were family as well? You can only assume they must have had thousands of conversations over the years. Brynden Rivers, or the Three-Eyed Raven, was the Lord Commander at Castle Black for 13 years. So actually think about that. Maester Aemon and the Three-Eyed Raven worked hand in hand together at the Wall for well over a decade. And that was right before the Three-Eyed Raven disappeared while he was out beyond the Wall. Maester Aemon most likely would have discovered some of his secrets while living under the same roof. That is if the Three-Eyed Raven didn't tell him himself, which I think he did. Once again, this would have been for a very good reason. I also don't think it's a coincidence that these characters ended up living for over 100 years. They were among some of the oldest characters still alive in Westeros. It's almost as if they were staying alive long enough until someone else arrived, like they were waiting for something. I will get back to this later. Now, as I said before, after he was the Lord Commander at Castle Black for 13 years, Brynden Rivers eventually went missing out beyond the Wall. No one knew where he went or what actually happened to him, but I believe Maester Aemon did. I believe they stayed in contact and even continued working together over the years, even if Maester Aemon didn't know it was him. Now, getting back to Maester Aemon's old age, it almost feels as if something was keeping him alive just long enough until he could ensure certain events happened at Castle Black. What are the odds that he would be able to survive for that long in such a harsh environment, only to die shortly after Jon Snow, one of our main characters, became the new Lord Commander at Castle Black? If you ask me, I think Maester Aemon was waiting for him, under orders from the Three-Eyed Raven. We now know the Three-Eyed Raven can look through the werewoods at different events, even some that haven't happened yet. I believe things were set in motion for certain characters to be in certain locations at certain times. I think that Maester Aemon was there at the Wall as sort of a guide to make sure these things still happened. Now, what's also really interesting is Maester Aemon was well aware of the Azor Ahai prophecy. In fact, he actually spoke about this with Rhaegar Targaryen. He knew that Rhaegar was convinced it would be one of his own sons who would fulfill this ancient prophecy. Now, I would be willing to bet that Maester Aemon spoke about this with the Three-Eyed Raven as well. I mean, they did spend 13 years together at the Wall. I'm sure his conversation with Rhaegar had to come up eventually. This also has always made me wonder why Rhaegar became so obsessed with the prince who was promised. What made him so sure it would be his son? Where did he get this information? Was it sent to him in a dream? Now, the Targaryens are known for having prophetic dreams. Was the Three-Eyed Raven influencing these events once again? Well, I think so. This is what ultimately led Rhaegar to fleeing south with Lyanna Stark. He needed another son, and as we all know, that son would be Jon Snow, a character Maester Aemon grew fond of almost instantly. Not only did Maester Aemon help Jon Snow, but so did the Three-Eyed Raven in many different ways. For one, it was no coincidence the Starks stumbled across exactly enough direwolves for each of the children, including Jon Snow. What's also interesting about this is how similar Ghost is to Bloodraven. They are both described as being white as bone, with eyes as red as blood. I believe that's because he is almost always inside Ghost. That way he could lead Jon on his journey of facing off against the others. In the books, it was actually Ghost who found the hidden stash of dragonglass and what might have been the Horn of Winter out beyond the wall. Now, who do you think hid those items there in the first place? My guess is it was done by Bloodraven and or the Children of the Forest, since they do work hand in hand. It was also Maester Aemon and the Three-Eyed Raven who assisted in Jon Snow becoming the new Lord Commander at Castle Black. As we saw in the show, it was Maester Aemon who gave Jon Snow the last vote, which ultimately won him the election. Now, in the books, they actually cast their votes inside this giant kettle before they count them. When they opened it during the election, a raven flew out of it and landed right next to Jon. When that happened, the raven said, "Snow." The raven ends up saying Jon's name a few more times, right before it then lands on his shoulder. It was actually Lord Commander Mormont's old raven. However, I believe it was the Three-Eyed Raven inside of it. I think this is a good example of Maester Aemon and the Three-Eyed Raven working together, so they could ensure Jon Snow became the new Lord Commander at Castle Black. Another very interesting thing happens with this raven, while Jon Snow is having a conversation with Lord Commander Mormont. During the conversation, Lord Commander Mormont is actually talking to Jon about Maester Aemon's family and their history, most notably the Targaryen kings. I don't think this is a coincidence because we now know Jon is a Targaryen king as well. Now, before the conversation ends, Lord Commander Mormont says, Jaime Lannister killed the last of the Dragon Kings, referring to the Mad King. However, as soon as Mormont says that, the Raven begins saying the word king, as it looks right at Jon Snow. I think the Raven is letting us know Jaime Lannister did not kill the last Dragon King, because Jon Snow is a secret Targaryen next in line for the Iron Throne. And just like I said about the election, I think it was the Three-Eyed Raven inside of this raven saying king as it looked at Jon. Something else I should mention is what happens when Stannis and Melisandre arrive at Castle Black in the books. As you all know, Melisandre once believed that Stannis was Azor Ahai. She even says that he has the sword Lightbringer. As a matter of fact, Stannis' sword even glows in the books, but we all know he's not the real Azor Ahai, nor does he have the real sword Lightbringer. Maester Aemon knew this as well. He knew Stannis wasn't Azor Ahai, and he knew his sword wasn't Lightbringer because the blade was not hot. He actually says that to Sam. He said he did not feel no heat when he was near the sword, but as we all know, Lightbringer should be a burning hot, glowing red sword. He says a few very interesting things to Jon Snow, most likely knowing this would be the last time they would ever speak to each other. During this conversation, this is when Maester Aemon feels Jon Snow's face before he gives him the kill the boy speech. What I find so interesting about this is when Maester Aemon feels Jon Snow's face, it immediately reminds him of his brother Aeg, or Aegon Targaryen. It makes me think there must have been something about Jon's bone structure in his face that reminded Aemon of his brother, who interestingly enough has the same name as Jon. Not only that, but this was also the same thing Aemon said to his brother Aeg right before he left King's Landing for the Wall. Now Maester Aemon is giving the same speech to another King Aegon, which again, I don't think is a coincidence. Kill the boy, Jon Snow. Kill the boy, and let the man be born. There is one other thing Maester Aemon does before he leaves Castle Black. He gives Jon Snow a book, and this book was known as the Jade Compendium. He lets Jon know he left a marker inside the book because there is something very specific he wants him to read while he's gone. When Jon finally opens that book, he sees what Maester Aemon wants him to read. It was the section about Azor Ahai and his sword Lightbringer. Now, you could definitely say Maester Aemon did that so Jon would realize Stannis wasn't the real Azor Ahai. However, I believe it has more than one meaning. Maybe he wanted Jon to see something in himself. Something that maybe only Maester Aemon, a blind man, could see. Kill the boy, Jon Snow. Kill the boy, and let the man be born.
A Targaryen, alone in the world. It's a terrible thing.